Alright, what's going on guys? Liam here and welcome back to another video on this channel. And in today's video, I want to talk about ice and the state of it in PvP right now in the current meta. Now, at the time I'm recording this video, it is actually a week before Wallaroo is about to come out. So keep that in mind. Ice, honestly, I played it a lot the past 4 months. I had a lot of fun with it until a lot of Jades came around and everybody started hopping on their life wizards, and I actually thoroughly like the school quite a bit. Okay, I just want to preface that right away here before I talk about you know the meta, objective facts, and how I feel and my opinions about the school. Okay, guys, I do enjoy it quite a bit actually. So my opinion in general on ice is the fact that it's not a bad school. Okay, it's just a horrible school in this meta. Okay, guys. Now, I'm going to try to convince you of that in this video and break it down with everything right now in the meta and everything available to ice and everything working against it as to why it's not great right now in the meta. Okay, so let's talk about some facts right away here, right? So, what schools does ice counter? Death and Storm. Storm doesn't play right now because of how bad it is, right? So obviously, if there's no storms in queue, that's not going to be a free win for ice. So that's indirectly kind of bad for ice. Okay. Death is a top 3 school right now. Top 3, top 4, depending on how you look at it. It's one of the 4 schools that are queued currently right now in the meta. However, ice can simply just ice word, run Dark Marduk, Shrike, Dumoni, and absolutely obliterate an ice. So that matchup is a little tough. It's honestly kind of even, in my opinion, I would say. As long as the death is ice warded, I would say it's actually a pretty even matchup. So that is the 2 matchups that are good for ice. The only 2. Okay. Now let's look at the bad matchups. We have Myth and we have Fire. Again, this is objective according to Rochambeau and the developers, right? So Fire, like Storm, isn't really queued right now because of how bad and unplayable it is right now, unfortunately. But I would say Fire versus Ice, at least in live realm right now, is honestly a pretty even matchup. You know, I think either player could win if they, play well, in my opinion, personally, right now. So I don't think Fire is that big of a deal. It's not really queued, so that's indirectly good for Ice. And when it is queued right now, it's kind of an even matchup, right? So next up, we have Myth. Now, Myth is where we start to see some problems. Myth is a really good school right now in this meta, okay? And it's a counter to Ice. So good schools are always spammed. That's how it works in this game, whether you like it or not, okay? Myth can trap stack Ice. Blade stack doesn't really work that good, but they could if they want to. They can shield stack. They can dot with Divum or Bassi. They can detonate that with Troll. They have a lot of options. And they have really good damage, pierce, and resist, which is all like the top 3 important stats alongside with okay health as well. Like I said, the schools you counter either aren't queuing or they actually have a good chance against you, right? And then the schools that are good against you either aren't queuing, like Fires, or it's like an even matchup in your favor, or just even in general, sorry. And then you have one really bad matchup, which is Myth. Okay. Now, let's get into the actual problems with Ice. Now, this is going to be life and balance. Life, balance, and Myth are the bane of your existence. Okay. Now, keep in mind, guys, there are only 4 schools that are being queued right now, right? Balance, life, death, and Myth, right? Like I said, Storm and Fires aren't playing. Their schools are unplayable right now in the meta. Ices don't really play, but we're talking about that for this video. So, I mean, that kind of have to talk about it, right? So those are the only 4 schools that are meta and popular and queued right now. Okay. So why is balance good against Ice? If you're a dev watching this, you might ask yourself that. Simply because balance's cards are very overtuned and very powerful and very basic. So look at Mana Burn, right? That's good against every single school, right? And Ice, that doesn't really have a lot of options for hitting, like maybe a Storm, for example, right? As bad as Storm is, you at least have a variety of pips of hits to use. Ice doesn't really have that, right? So on an ice, you're either frostbiting, A-bombing, Tamaguchiing, or Gammoning. So most of the time what it boils down to is maybe frostbite A-bomb, okay? So you either need to literally have a shad and pips to do that shad, or you can frostbite, which gets gearheaded, which we'll talk about in a minute here. Um, so if you bubble against a balance that indirectly buffs their Hydra, what is one of the top 3 cards in the game right now? Hydra. Okay. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna Ellie Shield to try and counter said Hydra. Okay. You Ellie Shield, you get Hydra through the shield, it still does decent damage. Now they have 335 shields. Okay. Now you can't really hit through that because of how powerful that one shield is, and of how high resist is in general in the meta. So you can't really hit through it. So your only other option is to overtime. Now, if you overtime, you have to spend at least 5 pips on that frostbite. But here's the problem: gearhead. You frostbite, they gearhead for 1 less pip, and they get way more value for spending 1 less pip. Okay, so they actually gain on you and gain way more value by just clicking that exchange. And then they still have a shield left over for your follow-up that they can't hit through. Okay, so you can't do anything against Hydra. You can't hit through the shields because Hydra shield's too powerful and resist is too high. You can't really just stack buffs or stack pips because you'll just get burned and die, right? You can't really gambit because everybody's got like, max trap counters, and you don't really see ices going for 3-folds because like even if you pull it off, it doesn't really do much because of how high resist is right now. Which is another point I'm going to get into shortly here, is ice's damage output feels low. This is a common criticism I've heard from players, and I actually agree with it after playing a lot of ice. If you play a storm or a fire, you don't feel that weak. You feel like about what you would expect for the most part on an ice. But the second you play one of the 5 resist schools, so we're talking like balance, death, myth, life, ice itself, right? Any of those, you just feel really weak and like not confident at all. I think I can speak for most ice players. When you're playing regular ice against a resist school, that's how you feel, right? So I think the argument of ice feeling weak is not because your damage and pierce is low. Your damage and pierce is low because your identity is to be weak, but you're supposed to be a tank and like stack shields. That's your identity. You're not supposed to do damage. If you want to do damage, play another school, right? You should not be expecting damage on an ice in general. Now, what I will say in the favor of these people who are saying ice is too weak is resist is too high, right? When 5 out of these 7 schools essentially have your resist with higher DPP and like way better stats, it's gonna feel really crappy to feel your school, and when you play your school, sorry, and when you play those schools, like if I'm a ice A-bombing a death, even though I'm supposed to counter death, I still feel like I'm doing no damage to them. I feel like I'm tickling them with an A-bomb, right? It's just like a tickle fest, And I don't know, man. It's just, I think resist universally is too high, and that indirectly hurts ice a lot because of how weak their lethality is, right? Obviously, it hurts storm a lot because bigger the number, bigger the subtraction, but ice, just their damage doesn't really keep up with how high resist is right now. So if resist comes down even a little bit for those schools, I think that'll help with the feeling of ice feeling like hopeless and weak, because that's a very, like I said, common criticism I've heard in the community about the school. Okay. So that's the whole damage debunk that ice mains are having problems with. We talked about balance. Let's talk about life now. Okay. Now, this is supposed to be a neutral matchup in terms of Rochambeau, but it's not. Life should win this probably like 10 times out of 10 if you're a good player, I would argue. Ice can steal Goat Monk and Caddy with Snowdrift, which isn't supposed to be in the game, so I'm going to overlook that. That's going to get banned someday, like how Storm lost in Feeble, because Storm isn't supposed to be countering Blades. Ice is not supposed to be countering heals, right? It's on a ticking time bomb. It's going to go someday, right? So I'm going to take Snowdrift out of the equation. So the issue is here, right? As an ice, you can't really use Pirate or Triton. And that's simply because the cards are bad. Like, everybody knows this. The counters, Pirate, Triton, they're just not good. Not even for the schools that they're on. So when somebody tries to dual school it, it's just not good. So the other options you're left with are Infection, Threefold, and Doom. Now, all three of these are only minus 50. So you're probably like, okay, Liam, I'm Infection, I'm Dooming, and I'm still losing against life on my ice, right? Now, the issue with this is because when you have spells that hit and heal immediately, like Goat Monk and Caddy, okay, you got to realize you're hitting with life DPP, right? You're doing life damage. And then you have a whole back end on that heal, okay? That is like double ISIS DPP. So even though I'm hitting through that infect, I'm still keeping up with their hits when you actually match out my life DPP output and my life heal per pip output. Hitting through is actually a good move in those cases, right? And this is why you see Life's Ward to Death and Storm, because that just bridges the gap between DPP so they can heal through infects and yada yada and dooms, and they're fine, right? So infects don't work, dooms don't work because they just sanctuary over it usually, right? Threefold is honestly probably one of your best bets, but the issue with that, everybody's packing like 12 weakness counters. So if you threefold them, oftentimes they turn that into even more stalling, which actually gets used against you to stall more to do less damage. So it's not even worth threefolding because they'll turn it into a shield or a weakness, and then you're even more screwed, right? So bad idea. The best way to counter life right now is like Triton, Infect, and Doom in general on all 7 schools, but even then it's like just doesn't really work if the life is competent, right? So basically the life can just do whatever they want. They can hit through the debuffs, you know, whether it's a shield or an infection or a doom, and they'll still always outvalue you, right? Now you can't really stack against a life because if you trap stack, they centaur and kick your ass. If you blade stack, they just pack like 4 quakes or 4 banshees and you lose. If you weakness stack, they have like 12 weakness counters in. So you'll just get ran out of copies and they'll reshuffle, get another 12 back, right? So you can't really do much. You can't gambit them. You can't chip them down because of how high their numbers are in general with resist and healing, and how the infections, threefolds, and dooms don't really work because they're too undervalued. And I've even talked about regenerate spamming or pixie spamming, right? They can spam like 10 regenerates per reshuffle. And you can't pirate and Triton and keep up with them because, first of all, who's packing 10 pirates or Tritons? First of all. Second of all, the burst is always going to do more than the actual damage on the pirate or the Triton, right? And third of all, you get the utility of a shield and a blade, which is kind of okay, but the shield doesn't matter if the life isn't trying to kill you, and the blade doesn't matter because they can just Banshee 2 blades off and then put you behind like 3 turns. Or they can shield every turn that the blade's up and then do another one, right? And they'll always gain on you because if I regen and they pirate, that's fine. That's fine. My burst heal did more than the actual hit on the pirate, so just the burst heal, pip for pip, is still better, right? So, and then if you Triton, it's 1 more pip, and then it gets Banshee, then you're 3 turns behind. So, you're just kind of screwed, right? So, the actual counters to the healing don't work right now, and again, life is a resist school when it's not supposed to be according to Rochambeau, but life is one of those schools that have the resist stat at a very high level in the meta. So when you hit a life in general, you feel like you're not doing damage because you're low DPS output and how high resist is universally in the meta. So against an ice, you feel like you do no damage, and they can just hit through debuffs and win because, well, they literally can because their numbers support that, right? So oftentimes what you see life do is just simply, you know, like pack 10 regens, pack 10 hit and heals because the value on those cards is way too high and the actual counters to them don't really work. I know at the end of a game, I can just simply Goat Monk in your gen over and over, and eventually, if I pack enough for shuffles and click fast, I will win that game. And that's what you see right now in the meta. So this is kind of why Ice is really bad in the meta. I hope I did a good job explaining it. Obviously, you have good things about Ice, which is, Frostbite, Tamaguchi, Mammoth, all above damage per pip. You have a Shield Gambit, which are top tier gambits still after getting nerfed twice. What else do you got? Resist as a stat in general, they're just really good. I know 4 other schools have it as well, but it's a really good stat in general right now in this meta. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that's it. You got Blimp as well, which is just like objectively broken. But aside from Blimp, Frostbite, Tamaguchi, this school really has nothing going for it. It really doesn't. So, if they were to fix, Blimp, Frostbite, and Tamaguchi and follow their own rules, you simply have a school that can't really do anything. And I think that's why my opinion is Ice isn't bad, right? Because you still have Blimp, Frostbite, Tamaguchi, right? It's just in this meta, it is horrible. It is horrible because Death can set so hard and it's overwhelm you and over counter you, right? Myth just kicks your ass. Life just kicks your ass. Balance kicks your ass, right? And the schools that you're like might be good against, like you can beat a Fire or you beat a Storm, they're not even playing the game because of how bad their schools are. So you're only getting matchups that aren't favored for you to win, right? Ice isn't bad. It's just half the game counters you and destroys you, and the other half of the game isn't playing because of how unplayable their schools are right now in the meta. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Different kind of video, I know. If you guys want to see more of this, let me know down there in the comments below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching, and take care, y'all.